Welcome back to another GTN Coaches Corner where we answer your triathlon and racing related questions. This week we've got a swim focused Coaches Corner. We're tackling questions like converting your pool swim to the open water.
And swimming in zone 2.
Nausea in choppy waters.
Simulating the open water whilst in the pool.
And how to exit the water fast. Now
Go ahead.
Well, first off, we've got a few questions in a similar vein. So
they're all roughly the same question.
Yeah, actually. So they come from Hambling Along, Idle Gum Ruck, and Alex Walmsley asking, my open water swim pace is about 10 to 15 seconds per 100 slower than the pool. I got my pool sets down to 140 per 100 over the winter from around 155. Started swimming 2 years ago. But now I've gone back outdoors. The pace increase isn't transferring. Is it all down to specificity as I've only done about 5 to 6 open water sessions the last 2 months? My wetsuit is a basic one, so I'm considering an upgrade to try that out too. And they're all kind of similar, the three questions we've got there.
3 questions. I'm sure there are many more than 3 people out there that have the same question, so we'll try and answer it for you. Okay, first, a few reasons why you might not be as fast in the open water as you are in the pool. First, equipment. Different equipment is obviously going to change your body position, so wearing a wetsuit versus not wearing a wetsuit might just change your body position enough that you actually slow yourself down. And I know wetsuits are supposed to be faster, but they aren't always faster, especially if it changes your body position. Also, lower quality wetsuits or poorly fit wetsuits can slow you down rather than speeding you up. They can also increase the drag or the resistance on your shoulders, making that shoulder burn. They can decrease the amount that your body rolls. All of those things can actually work to slow you down if you're not in the right wetsuit for you or a decent quality wetsuit for your swim.
And on that, I mean, we actually had a video out on the channel just the other day, the wetsuit you want versus the wetsuit you need. Rather than necessarily thinking going for the top end wetsuit is going to make you fast, actually some of the lower end wetsuits might be better for you. So you don't necessarily need to spend more to go faster, if that makes sense, because some of the lower end wetsuits actually may promote a better hip or leg angle and try and get you a little bit more neutral in the water. So bear that in mind.
A lot of people go for absolute maximum buoyancy, but if you're really someone with good body position, maximum buoyancy can actually slow you down. You actually might want a different suit, even a lower end suit, to make you swim better. On that note, you do also swim differently in the open water for a couple of reasons. Firstly, just putting your head down into dark water is counterintuitive for a human being, and so you tend to not put it as deep, which means your head stays a bit higher. You also have to sight, so you have to look up regularly, so your head again is higher, and all these things lead to you kind of changing your body position, your feet sinking a little bit more than they normally would, and that slows you down too. You need to really focus on getting the head down in the water as if you were looking at a black line underneath you like you were in the pool, even though there is no black line there. The perspective that you have is your focus point becomes the point when you breathe, because that's when you can see the tree, the mountain, whatever's on the side. And when you're under the water, there's no focus point whatsoever, so your head's all over the place and you quickly get it back to the focus point. Whereas in the pool, your focus point is the black line, so you breathe and then you bring it back to the focus point on the black line and you stay in that position. So you've got to try and do that in the open water, because that will slow you down.
Yeah, and then the other thing is actually in the pool, you continually get these mini breaks, whether that's you're doing touch turns or tumble turns. Your arms will just pause for a second. You get a short break before having to start the stroke again. Obviously, in the open water, you are just swimming continuously, endlessly until you finish the lap or however far you're doing. And that is very different, and you may feel that fatigue over the course of the event or whatever you're doing.
Yeah, so don't underestimate those tiny little 1 second breaks you get. Your arms get, your core gets, everything gets when you do a tumble turn or a turn against the wall. Finally, one more point that we should probably point out. What are you measuring your pace with? Because you're probably not using a GPS watch in the pool, and you probably are in the open water, and so the accuracy of those possibly a little bit dubious. GPS watches are notoriously bad at measuring your actual distance out in the open water, so don't pay too much attention to your actual paces out there. Don't get hung up on a few seconds here and there. It may just be a measuring error. You may actually be swimming just fine, and you're just talking yourself out of it.
Cool. Next question. This is an interesting one from Hornet Luca. Hello there, I have a couple of questions. Every time I swim, no matter how hard I train, I spend most of the time in zone 2. Why is that? So is swimming the best sport to do zone 2? And they go on to say, sometimes I feel nausea during long swimming sessions. I wonder if it's the motion sickness or something else. How do I prevent it from happening?
We'll get to the nausea one in a minute. Let's first answer the other half. Firstly, when you talk about zone 2 in the swim, what are you using to measure your zone 2? Because much like the GPS in the last one, heart rate monitors are notoriously bad in the water. Some of them do work, and it is possible that you are in zone 2 the whole time, but it is also possible that you are not getting accurate readings on your heart rate monitor. So make sure you're actually comparing a real number.
I mean, in theory, swimming is a full body workout, so there is actually more potential for you to actually get your heart rate up. And top swimmers will be able to get their heart rate right up to their maximum because they're literally using their arms, their back muscles, their legs, everything is working. The blood is flowing around so well within the body. If you're not getting your heart rate up and you are measuring this accurately, it may be that you simply aren't actually swimming as efficiently or as well, or actually pushing yourself as hard as maybe you think you are.
Well, yeah, you're working really hard, your arms, but if you're just kind of aboard in the water with your arms working really hard, that's not a lot of muscle mass to generate that high heart rate. And you may find that you just can't get your heart rate that high. That's pretty normal unless you're an elite swimmer who can really engage every part of their body and their being to flow through the water really fast, which, let's be honest, most of us triathletes can't do. So be aware of that. Your heart rate won't be as high unless you are really working hard and you are using your entire body, which generally is only super short sprints. That is important to note. To answer your question as far as is zone 2 the best or is swimming the best zone 2 training, as in you should do all your zone 2 in the water and then you could do higher intensity bike and run training? The answer is no, unfortunately. Zone 2 is great in the water. It's low impact. You can do lots of it. However, it's not specific enough. Zone 2 is not just about staying in that heart rate zone. It's also about capillary density, blood flow, gas exchange in your lungs and gas exchange at the actual level of the muscle. And that you can only do by specifically training the muscles that you need to in zone 2. So you do also have to do zone 2 bike and zone 2 run work.
Yeah. All right, should we get on to the second part of the question? Because we also had another one in from eCockman17. And he has also said, I did my first triathlon the other day. It was raining, open water swim in the small lake with a little bit of chop. I got nauseous when I was only a couple of 100 meters in and had to mix sculling on my back with freestyle to make it through. Any suggestions for dealing with that? I have 3 more events this summer, and at least 2 of them I'm told to expect even more chop.
Ooh. Nausea in the swim is not pleasant.
Have you had it before?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But really, like, we're talking proper ocean, like proper waves. And that was definitely seasickness. It's possible that it's not seasickness that you're experiencing here. There's a few other explanations. Seasickness is very possible in the open water. And there's a couple of reasons for this. One is obviously swells. If you're in a lake, though, that's unlikely that the swells are big enough to cause that. If it's just chop causing your seasickness, it's quite possible what you're doing is over moving your head, if that makes sense. Because you're always worried about getting your mouth back to the air and you don't know where that's going to be. You overcompensate because there might be a chop there. So you really lift your head high, you then really put your head low, you then really lift your head high again, and you can just imagine what that feeling is doing to your inner ear. And you're going to feel not good pretty quickly. So try to swim like you do in the pool until it's time to breathe. Head down and go forward. Keeping your head under the water rather than keeping your head somewhere where you know where the surface of the water is the whole time. And yeah, try not to fight it too much. There's a few other causes, though, that might cause your nausea.
Well, yeah, one is maybe gut related. And actually, I would add to this that maybe it's also the race day nerves as well heading into it. So actually, that could do all sorts to your gut prior to. And if you go out really hard in the swim initially, which a lot of us do, let's face it, it can just do all sorts to your gut. And then on top of that, with all the things that the choppy water, it can just leave us in all sorts of trouble.
Essentially, all the blood's going to go to your working muscles, your arms and your legs, and you're going to leave no blood in your gut, which combine that with even a tiny bit of swallowed water or some food that you had for breakfast that isn't fully digested yet, and you're going to feel not good.
Now, I would actually say really choppy lake swims personally I'd say are harder than choppy sea swims, because on a lake it's often caused by the wind, so you've just got this ripple, very constant ripple that's very hard to find a rhythm for, so you're constantly being battered by. Whereas in the sea you can find the rhythm with the waves, and actually, you know, a bit of sighting, you can dive down through waves and find that rhythm, and with the breathing that we were just talking about. Whereas in the chop on a lake, which sounds like you were doing, it can be really hard, but the main thing is to actually just try and stay relaxed and not fight it, and try and, as James says, lifting your head up and swaying around and moving too much, just kind of like try and glide through it.
Yeah, also we would suggest try earplugs if it's a constant problem, because water in the ear can also mess with that proprioception of where level is and what your normal is. So a little bit of water in the ear can really screw up your inner balance, and put some earplugs in and you might find that that's a very simple, quick solution for your seasickness in the swim. Okay, next question is from Liam Hale McCarty, says #GTNcoachescorner. How would you recommend trying to get better at open water swimming when you don't have easy access to open water? I just did an Olympic try, and though I can swim the distance in about 27 minutes in a pool, it took me way longer in open water, 42 minutes. Because of choppy water, trouble seeing boys, getting kicked in the head a bunch, well, must have been a rough swim. The only open water swimming opportunities I ever had have been races themselves, so it's been quite hard to get better. Is there anything I can do in a pool setting to better prepare for open water?
Right. Well, this is actually something that I used to do loads of, because a lot of the races would happen quite early on in the season. There's no opportunity to do open water swimming. So let's answer this one quickly. You can start sighting in the swimming pool, and you can do this just simply throwing in occasional sights whilst you're swimming along, just during a normal session. You can even pop a bottle at the end of the pool, and it's like every time you swim that way, you sight that bottle. You can swim in a group with others, so actually just starting to swim on people's feet. And if maybe you have access to the whole lane or multiple lanes, you can even start toying with swimming alongside one another and really getting used to that close proximity to others. And then the other thing, and again, this is dependent on whether the pool allows it, starting to use some of the gear that you would normally use on race day, be that in a tri-suit, swim skin, wetsuit, and just getting used to that kit and feeling as relaxed and comfortable as possible. So it's not just such a big shock when it comes to race day.
Also try to get used to that lack of perception of where you are. Try to feel your perception. So try to swim a little bit with your closed eyes, again, in a safe pool where there aren't people coming towards you. But try to swim a few strokes with closed eyes and see where you tend to veer, because that's obviously a perception thing, that when you get in the open water, there's no black line. You kind of have to gauge for yourself, and you panic and you tend to sight every second stroke. So get an idea of how straight you actually swim.
Cool. And final question from Banana P. I have my first open water sea swim sprint triathlon in a few weeks, and I wondered which is the quickest / most effective way of exiting the water. I've tried a few methods, but all seem quite slow. Any tips would be much appreciated.
That's very niche, isn't it? They really are looking down into the seconds. They're clearly not worried about the swim at all, just not losing those seconds when they get out of the water.
Well, you say this though, you know, for the gram, you know, those photos of you coming out of the swim, you want them to look good and not you like kind of like wading through water.
No one's ever got that right, have they? You always look like a drowned rat when you come out there.
I thought I looked pretty good actually. Anyway, so one of the key things is actually just swimming in as far as you can, presuming it is like a beach exit or sort of like a ramp that you're coming out on. A lot of people stand up too soon and suddenly they're trying to wade through the water and lift their legs up over the water. Then you start to get cramp in your hips and all sorts of things, and it's not pretty. Try and swim in as far as possible, so you will have your hands sort of touching the floor. You can even maybe like put your hands in and grab some of the sand or whatever as you start to get closer. So you're almost like
as far as you can, like till you're doing strokes like under your chest, as far as you can.
Push yourself up, and then you can just flick your legs up and over the water quite nicely.
Stand in the ankle deep water. Also, to prevent those cramps that Mark talked about, kick a little bit more. The last 100 to 200 meters, really ramp up that kick. Exaggerate it. It might feel really weird and almost throw your stroke out a little bit, but it's worth it to have that blood going through your legs when you get out, especially the longer swims, the half Ironman and Ironman swims, where you haven't really used your legs that much for a long time. When you suddenly stand up and try and use them, that's when you get the cramping and the feeling really awkward and you can't really run and you stumble, etc. That can be offset by just kicking a little bit harder in the last couple of hundred meters.
And that will help with not only the dreaded jelly legs that people feel, but also slight head rushes. And also to help that, rather than just standing bolt upright as soon as you come out. You can maybe just kind of run with your head down a little bit whilst you maybe start to get your wetsuit open. Just kind of a little bit of a crunch and just build into it a little bit. So rather than just straight up.
Don't go straight from horizontal to vertical and back to horizontal if you do it
Go
wrong.
easy on yourself.
One final point I'd say, take your goggles off as soon as you're standing up and out the water, but leave the rest to transition till that's all settled down and you feel comfortable again. You can run most of the way to transition before you start faffing with your wetsuit or your goggles or your swim cap or anything like that. Just focus on finding a rhythm and taking a deep breath.
I do
transition.
generally find that with transitions, and everyone suddenly thinks everything has to happen so quickly, but actually you've got time, and the more you rush it, the more mistakes happen and the more time you actually end up losing in the grand scheme of things. So chill.
Hope that helps and you get the next one a lot better. Well, that's all our questions for this week. If you have your own questions below this video or any of our videos, hashtag GTN Coaches Corner, we'll pick up that question and we could be answering it next week. Thanks for watching and happy training.
See you next time.